You're about to hear about the moment a royal family member nobody ever talks about basically declared war on the Queen and actually won. But here's the thing that should alarm everyone. This person has spent decades being invisible, known for showing up to events in practical clothes, keeping his head down, never making waves, and then suddenly, in the middle of one night, he unleashed something that's going to reshape how this entire family operates for generations. If you've ever wondered how real power works inside royal circles, stick around because this story explains everything the official palace statements will never touch. Drop a subscribe if you want deep dives that actually break down the legal chess moves happening behind palace walls. So here's what actually went down. Around 11:45 p.m., a car left Bagshot Park, that's Prince Edward's residence, and headed toward Windsor. Inside wasn't a friendly visitor or a letter asking for a conversation. It was a courier holding an official envelope, carrying the Duke of Edinburgh's seal, and something way more serious, a legally binding eviction notice. Nobody in the palace network saw this coming. That wasn't an accident. Edward specifically timed this for when King Charles was staying at Sandringham, going through medical treatments, and completely unreachable. Think about that for a second. He didn't just evict someone. He did it during the exact window when the king couldn't intervene, which is either brilliant or ruthless, honestly, probably both. The notice gave Camilla 72 hours to pack up her personal belongings and leave Windsor Lodge. Not a conversation starter, not a negotiation period, a hard deadline. And what makes this actually possible is something buried so deep in royal property law that it sounds like fiction. Edward's legal team spent months digging through archives at Windsor Castle, and they discovered something from the 1940s during King George VI's reign. Back then, the royal family restructured how they managed certain smaller estates. They set up special trusts, specifically designed to keep certain properties protected from government control, and to give the younger branches of the family some actual security. Buried in those ancient documents was this incredible clause. It said the line of the youngest son had permanent hereditary authority over Windsor Lodge, the power to say no. Charles's own lawyers completely missed this. They hadn't even found it during recent audits. But Edward's team did. They verified it with constitutional experts, and suddenly Edward had a weapon that was legally untouchable. Here's where it gets stranger. The eviction didn't just say Camilla needed to leave. It said the property was being transferred immediately to Lady Louise Windsor, Edward's daughter, who's 22 years old, and basically a university student. She's not part of the official working royal roster. She studies English literature at St. Andrews and keeps an incredibly low profile. Now suddenly she's becoming the owner of one of the most secure estates inside the Windsor boundaries, and this completely contradicts everything Charles has been saying about slimming down the monarchy. The moving trucks were already scheduled to show up at sunrise. By the time anyone could breathe or make a phone call, it would be over. But let's talk about what actually happened when Camilla found out. Early morning, two unmarked moving vans pull up to the gates. It's barely light outside. The estate security team is standing by. Then another car arrives from a different direction, and Camilla's in the front seat wearing sunglasses even though the sun isn't up yet. She rolls down the window and tells the head of security she needs access. The gates don't open. Normally, the Queen's vehicle goes through any royal security checkpoint without stopping, but this guard is holding a clipboard and he's not moving. His orders came straight from Edward's office, and they were absolute. No vehicles allowed through until the property inventory was complete. Camilla gets out of the car, her secretary beside her, and demands to see the authorization. The guard hands her a copy of that 1940s covenant. It's signed by King George VI. There's a seal that hasn't been used in more than 70 years. It spells everything out in language that's legally airtight. Camilla's secretary tries calling Buckingham Palace. Every call goes straight to voicemail. Charles is at Sandringham under strict orders to avoid stress, and his entire staff has been told to block all non-emergency calls. Edward planned this perfectly. He timed it so Camilla couldn't even reach her own husband. That's not just aggressive strategy, that's precision. It's the kind of move that makes you realize this wasn't impulsive. This was calculated months in advance. So why would Edward risk completely destroying his relationship with the king's wife over a country house? Windsor Lodge isn't the biggest property in the entire royal collection. It's a modest brick building surrounded by oak forest. But for Camilla, it was something completely different. It was where she kept her private family records, her personal journals, gifts she'd collected over decades, things she wanted separate from the official state archives. When the moving crews actually got inside, they weren't moving typical furniture. They were tracking crates filled with personal documents and historical items. Edward wasn't just taking back a building, he was securing specific items he believed belonged to the late Queen's legacy, not to Camilla's personal collection. The crates got split between a storage facility in Surrey and a small private cottage on the edge of the Windsor estate. Camilla wasn't being moved to another royal home. She was being completely cut off from having her own private operational base inside Windsor. That means she has to use only official royal residences now, where every single visitor and document gets tracked by palace bureaucrats. For someone in her position, that's massive. The vans leave. Camilla drives back to London without saying anything else. Gates close. Then within an hour, a green car pulls up. Lady Louise steps out holding a duffel bag and a set of brass keys tied with a blue ribbon. She's wearing practical clothes like she's arriving for a university break, not taking control of the most controversial property in Britain. Her father is waiting at the door with the title documents. On the surface it looks casual, but this is completely shocking. Edward and Sophie have always said their kids would probably have to work regular jobs outside the royal system. So why would Louise suddenly accept a property that ties her to palace politics permanently? The answer apparently is that this lodge has serious stabling facilities that were built in 2002 for Prince Philip. Louise is genuinely passionate about carriage driving, and this property gives her a training base without depending on Charles's personal funding. It's not about luxury, it's about protecting a sporting and family legacy. But the palace bureaucracy struck back immediately. An hour after Louise signed the paperwork, someone from the Sovereign Grant Office showed up with a letter from the Treasury. Since the property was now owned by a non-working royal, all government-funded security patrols would stop at midnight. This was a direct punishment move designed to make the place impossible to live in before she even unpacked. Louise's response was apparently to walk out to the stables herself, check the perimeter fences personally, and then call a private security company run entirely by former royal protection officers. The younger generation wasn't backing down. The game was escalating. Meanwhile, Edward is sitting in his study at Bagshot Park with a leather notebook tracking every property transfer in Windsor from the last 50 years. Instead of calling Buckingham Palace, he calls Adelaide Cottage. That's Prince William's home. This is the alliance nobody was talking about until now. Edward and William have been coordinating for over 18 months. William is worried about how private documents and historical collections that are stored outside the main archives are going to be managed long-term. By supporting Edward's move to secure Windsor Lodge, William is making sure the younger generation's interests are protected. He's ensuring key properties stay under the control of the direct line of succession rather than people aligned with Camilla. This actually makes sense when you think about it. William and Edward apparently agreed during meetings in 2024 that the family needed physical properties inside Windsor to maintain their own security and independence. If certain estates got leased to commercial operators or distant relatives, the security around the castle could get compromised. So Edward's move wasn't about one house, it was about establishing precedent. By using that 1940s covenant, Edward just proved that the king doesn't have total control over every single piece of the family estate. That protection extends to other properties. It sends a message that anyone trying to remove senior royals in the future will face serious legal resistance. It's about reshaping the entire power structure. But then Camilla's legal team filed a counter lawsuit. They weren't fighting to get the house back. They were claiming ownership of the art collection hanging in the main gallery, rare watercolor paintings and private family portraits that were never listed in the official royal inventory. If Camilla could prove these were personal gifts and not crown property, she could force an auction or demand millions in compensation. Edward's response was pulling out the original inventory documents from the late Queen's estate records. The documentation showed that every single painting in that gallery had been registered as a permanent fixture of the property itself, legally inseparable from the building. He had lawyers deliver this to Camilla's team before court even opened the next morning. That counterattack was finished almost instantly, but Charles is sitting at Sandringham looking at newspaper headlines about his brother and his wife basically at war, while his medical team is telling him stress will interfere with his treatment. His Privy Council is warning that if he tries to overturn the covenant with a royal decree, it could trigger Parliament getting involved in discussions about whether the king has absolute power over crown lands. His own lawyers confirmed Edward's legal position is completely solid. If Charles tried to force Louise out, Edward's team was prepared to take it to open court, which would expose decades of private family financial agreements to public scrutiny. That covenant also contained clauses about distributing other historical assets and properties. If Charles fought this, he'd automatically trigger audits of multiple residences where senior royals live. Other homes might be operating under legally questionable agreements. Edward didn't just secure a single property. He created a legal minefield around the entire estate system and challenged the king to walk through it. Charles spent hours walking the gardens at Sandringham, looking at old photographs of King George VI, trying to understand what the trust was originally meant to do back in the 1940s. Eventually, he came to a realization: fighting this in public would permanently damage the monarchy's reputation. People dealing with their own economic struggles wouldn't have sympathy for royals arguing over multi-million-pound properties. Charles made his decision. He called his private secretary and ordered all legal responses from the Duchy of Lancaster office to stop. He signed an executive order confirming Lady Louise's residency. The legal standoff ended, but the damage inside his inner circle didn't heal. This moment marked a massive shift. The old system where the monarch had final authority was quietly breaking apart. The younger branches were building their own independent power bases before the next reign even started, and that's what actually matters for the future. By Friday morning, the moving trucks were gone. Private security was patrolling the perimeter. Louise was settled into the ground floor study where Camilla's journals had been just days earlier. Her university textbooks and horse-riding notebooks were on the shelves. The entire geography of the estate had been rewritten in 1 week. Camilla stayed in London, handling official duties and avoiding Windsor weekends. Her people viewed the whole situation as a calculated corporate move, a strategic strike during a moment of family vulnerability. The relationship between Camilla and Edward's family is now permanently damaged. Seating arrangements for events are being changed to keep them separated. Then William made an unannounced visit to the property Friday afternoon. He drove himself, took back roads from his home, and showed up with a housewarming gift for Louise. No press team, no official parade. The message to everyone at the palace was crystal clear: the future king approves of this. That endorsement killed any remaining plans for counterattacks. The traditional court factions realized challenging Louise was pointless. This is the beginning of a new era where the younger generation doesn't wait for permission. They secure their own territories, manage their own assets, and protect the late Queen's legacy through precise legal moves. The institutional managers at Buckingham Palace started scrambling to update organizational charts. Local land agents started routing paperwork through Bagshot Park instead of central authorities. A significant portion of Windsor was now operating outside immediate palace oversight. The public reaction when details leaked actually favored Louise. People saw her as a grounded, hard-working student. Commentators noted that her passion for carriage driving made her the perfect guardian for a property tied to Prince Philip's sporting legacy. The palace press office, unable to reverse anything, quietly let this positive narrative take hold. By the weekend, the lodge had transformed from a hidden archive into an active, independent base for this rising branch of the family. When you look at the whole picture, this was never about one property. It was about who controls the family's physical and historical assets moving forward. Edward found a legal tool that sat in archives for decades and used it at the exact moment when Charles couldn't fight back and William wouldn't stop him. Camilla lost a private sanctuary and the assumption that she could operate freely within Windsor. Louise gained the property and a permanent role in the family's internal power structure, whether she wanted it or not. Charles made the calculation that protecting the crown's public image mattered more than defending his wife's private interests. That's a cold choice that tells you everything about where the monarchy is heading. The old rules where the sovereign's word was final are breaking down. The younger branches are building independent power bases. And the royal everyone called boring just proved he's the one who actually knows how to win. What happens at Windsor next will reshape everything. If you made it this far, you clearly care about understanding how real power actually works. Drop a like, leave a comment telling me what you think about this situation, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the stories that shape